What can you tell me about Corley Pearson?
16-year veteran of the Sheriff's Office. He is the director of our Armed Services Division, which is basically our transportation services and court services.
What do you mean court services? Like, what is that?
Well, bringing inmates back and forth to court from the facilities, things like that.
Okay, I guess basically explain, Sheriff's Department side of what happened in that courtroom.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there was an incident where the judge was unhappy about some releases that didn't happen. Of course, the Sheriff's Office, we have a presence in the courtroom, and it was determined that the Sheriff's Office never received those releases. However, they never came from the court's office, the court clerk's office. But evidently there were some words exchanged in the courtroom, and at some point the judge ordered our Director of Transportation and Court Services into custody for contempt of court. And then at some point that individual prepared to turn his weapon over as part of protocol, since he had been ordered into custody. So he was going to surrender his weapon. And I think there was some confusion at that point about him, taking his weapon out of the holster to turn it over to a Sheriff's Office employee. And there was a few minutes of physical altercation, and it was over very quickly. And later, of course, the individual was never charged, so there were never any criminal charges that came about for this case.
Now, it's my understanding that the judge never held Officer Pearson, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Never held him in contempt of court, never ordered him to surrender a weapon, but asked him to have a seat multiple times.
Well, it's our understanding, and we're investigating it right now, but from our preliminary reports, he was told that he was going to be held in contempt of court. That was when, again, Officer Pearson, Mr. Pearson, was going to surrender his weapon, because he is a correctional person, a corrections person who knows that if you're going to be taken into custody, you of course can't have a weapon in the jail system. And so he was getting ready to give his weapon over to one of our employees, and then that's when there was a physical, altercation.
Now, what about this? I'm hearing that the judge just asked him to have a seat. He wouldn't have a seat. And then several officers came over to physically try to seat him, and then that's when he had his hand on his weapon. And
that is not at all what we have either seen in our in the video that you can see. There's no indication of that whatsoever. And then also preliminary interviews that we've had with people to this point, that is not the case whatsoever. After Mr. Pearson was restrained for a brief seconds, the judge then asked him to be seated, and at that point Mr. Pearson sat down, and then maybe an hour or so later he was told that he could leave.
Could he face disciplinary action? What is the status?
Well, we have to finish our internal investigation at this point, so based on the outcome of that, that is possible. But again, I wouldn't want to speculate as to what that could be. The biggest point was he did not pull a weapon in an open courtroom. The interviews that we've done to this point, no one felt threatened, the people that we've talked to. I think it was a misunderstanding as to what happened. And again, if someone had done that, they would be arrested and charged. And Mr. Pearson was never arrested, he was never physically taken to jail, and he was never at one point charged with anything criminally.
Because the judge says he never threatened, never held him, but he understands why his court officers moved in to what they saw might be a perceived threat.
Well, he was never charged with contempt of court. Again, from the interviews that we've had and from witnesses that we've talked to, there was an indication that he would be held in contempt of court. There were never any charges, so that is correct. There were never any charges brought up against Mr. Pearson.
Okay. Do you think he acted inappropriately or disrespectful towards the judge?
Again, I wouldn't want to speculate on that part. That would be something that I would want to wait until our investigation is complete, which should be in a couple of days. You know, we've had an investigator today that spent a lot of time interviewing witnesses, interviewing the judge, interviewing Mr. Pearson. So I would want that to be something that the conclusion is drawn upon the end of the investigation.
Is there a tenuous or difficult relationship at times between the Sheriff's Department, the judges, and or the clerk's office about how things are supposed to flow?
Well, I think that any time that you're in the criminal justice system, you know, things are going to happen, and I think the way any system is set up is there's potential for there to be conflicts. And so I wouldn't want to say we live in a perfect world and that would never happen in Davidson County, because obviously, based on this incident, there are things that happen that none of us really want to happen. But as always, we would certainly work towards any solution that may be deemed as a systematic problem.
So you think there could be room for improvement in the relationship, the working relationship between, because my understanding, all this kind of got irritated because an inmate was supposed to be released a day earlier, but he was kept in the lockup a day more than he should have been, and subsequently lost his job. And so this kind of thing, while it's not a regular thing, there are issues with release and communication between these offices. We never received the release from the clerk's office, so obviously there is room for improvement. How do you guys plan to do going forward to improve, you know, the communication, the working relationship between these offices to get people in and out of the system on time? Well, I think that we have to remember, you know, we book nearly 45,000 people a year. So I think it's important to remember that this is not a systemic problem. This is an unfortunate situation that happened, and of course, once our investigation is complete and we're certain about what exactly happened, we would, as the Sheriff's Office, we would want to work with anyone to improve any system. But to say that it's a regular and ongoing occurrence when we book 45,000 people in jail a year just wouldn't be a fair statement. Okay, but clearly the relationship or the communication needs to get better. Well, the fact that an individual was not released because we did not get the release from the clerk's office when we should have, and the individual was still in jail, that absolutely shows that there is room for improvement.